There exists a sensation so alien, yet so deeply human, that it captivates an entire lineage of artists to catch it into a genre. We call it existential horror because the monster does not only threaten your immediate safety, but your entire life narrative. The web of meaning that you had painstakingly woven in your life, crafting yourself, your past, and sense of purpose, starts to wobble all at once, as if spooked by something much larger. And in a single, strange moment, your mind takes the largest leap it most likely ever will in the shortest amount of time that it possibly could. The world, values, your sense of identity, all shift abruptly from a comforting certainty of knowing to a terrifying possibility of unknowing. Now, this feeling is quite hard to depict because the hallmark of an existential threat is that it can't be depicted, slipping through the fingers when your head tries to grasp it. But despite how alien this feeling might sound, we do instantly recognize its shadow when an artist does authentically capture it. And while we may not fully get what we are looking at, we can't help but stare. It resonates with something quite deep inside us. This horror, after all, isn't just cosmic or supernatural, it's distressingly human. Because down in the dense forest of our biology are programs designed to protect us from threats, not just to our bodies, but to our working minds. And now an existential rip, starting from a single loose thread, begins to unravel your entire design. The only thing you can do is observe, with part of you almost suspicious that it might all just be some bizarre trick. There is one story from a book that captures this well. A starving child lay flat, malnourished, as a vulture watches them in the distance, waiting. A photojournalist named Davidson takes a photo. The child dies. Davidson is praised with the Pulitzer Prize. Now, over time, the guilt chews on him. A thread has come loose, which he paints over with a beautiful wife, 2 kids, and a brand new house tucked away deep in the forest. Subtle is the horror that comes their way when the family returns home from a trip to find that there has been an intrusion. But the intrusion was so odd, none of them knew how to respond. Davidson takes his VHS camera and films what they see in puzzlement. His wife simply draws her hands to her face like she is about to pray, and the kids run straight through it, playing and giggling, not able to comprehend its broader implications. They had found an inexplicable space in their home, a closet-like space which now connected the master bedroom to the children's room. Yesterday it wasn't there. Now, trends in architecture often mirror the cultural psyche of their time, and in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Carl Jung recognizes that architecture, specifically the house, symbolizes the psyche itself. The exterior aligns with our relationship to the community, the interior reflects our alignment with the self. If you've ever had a dream where you discover hidden rooms in a familiar place, Jung would interpret this as a confrontation with an undiscovered or non-integrated aspect of your psyche. These dreams often emerge during life transitions or mental crossroads, moments when the mind holds 2 versions of itself simultaneously. The house, in this sense, can be viewed as an archetype of cognition, an outward projection of our inner state, just as a spider's web forms an extension of its own sensory system. Now, in this story, Davidson becomes obsessed with the sudden intrusion of space, spending hours mapping out and measuring the floor plans. First from inside the house, then from outside. He double checks, then triple checks. Again and again, he compares the measurements. And finally, it hits him that there are no errors. The results are consistent. What he discovers, to his horror, is that the inside of the house, specifically the living room wall, is about 1/4 inch longer than the same wall measured from the outside. Now, his brother, equally puzzled, tells him not to dwell too much on a 1/4 inch difference. Davidson, however, walks outside and stares deep into the forest. He's accompanied by an intense apprehension, as if something huge yet unknown has shifted in his world. German philosopher Martin Heidegger might reflect on this moment by saying that the world Davidson once felt at home in, the heimlich, has now become unheimlich, or unfamiliar. The unheimlich isn't a monster or an extraterrestrial being, it's the sudden failure of the world to make sense, the drop in your stomach when all meaning vanishes. It exists on a spectrum from working quietly in your home and becoming abruptly aware of the walls and the silence of your solitude, all the way to that moment when a GP tells you something that splits your life into a before and after. Now, the real Davidson that this book draws inspiration from is named Kevin Carter, the photojournalist behind the infamous image of a Sudanese child being watched by a vulture. He did win the Pulitzer Prize, and 4 months after receiving the award, Carter ran a hose from the exhaust pipe into his car, sat in the driver's seat, closed his eyes, and did not wake up. This is the note that he left. Carter suffered from the most brutal consequence of journalism's non-intervention dilemma, the conflict between having to document suffering objectively and the natural human urge to want to intervene. A similar psychological burden is carried among war veterans, where repeated exposure to traumatic events, especially seeing yourself play into its part, fractures the psyche, introduces an unheimlich, where your sense of self becomes scattered, unfamiliar. Carter's outer life remained still, but in the inside, the walls of his mind stretched, split, and twisted in on itself. Another real-life example is Sarah Winchester, heir to the Winchester rifle fortune. After the loss of her husband and child and haunted by all the deaths caused by the rifle sales that built her family's wealth, she began to build. And like a diseased spider, Sarah embarked on a lifetime of construction inside her mansion. With staircases that led nowhere and doors that opened into brick walls, it became a labyrinth not for living, but for containing. As if by building an external maze inside her house, she could keep up with the growing guilt within her own psyche. Now, the first page in one of the most influential existential horror books opens with this line.
The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents.
Lovecraft says something powerful here. Our continued sanity depends as much on our ability to ignore as on our ability to pay attention. Now, whilst you can't hold every fragment of your knowledge in your immediate awareness all at once, Lovecraft posits that if for a moment you could weave together all you knew, dissonant discoveries, cult sightings, strange geometries, dreams, thoughts, and facts, the truth you'd behold in awareness, the Umwelt, the totality would be so alien, so indifferent to our tiny pursuits and desires that we would in an instant go mad. Now, because our minds fail to knit every fact, image, and implication into one seamless picture, the gaps in our awareness actually spare us from knowledge that would unravel our sanity. This is what gives Lovecraft's existential threat of Cthulhu its power. If our awareness scatters across a fragment of reality at a time, Cthulhu is an event or a thing that reverberates across the whole, representing a mind-splitting encounter. It's likely an ancient concept too, with the Greeks, for example, having the basilisk, representative of a gaze so powerful it turns you into stone. Now, the same protective fracture Lovecraft speaks of, the inability to integrate everything into one seamless awareness, also appears in modern trauma research. When exposed to overwhelming experiences, the mind sometimes fragments reality as a way to lessen the emotional impact. Not being able to recall details of one's trauma is a common response to acute stress, but as we've seen, what our awareness refuses to stitch into a story can still scatter across the body, which keeps the score. As Basil van der Kolk writes,
Trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It is the current imprint of that pain on body, mind, and soul.
This is what somatization refers to. The trauma may live on not as coherent memory, but as scattered fragments across bodily sensations, haunting the walls of emotional centers in your brain's limbic system. And with the scent of a cologne, the drop of a pin, or in the dreams where the psyche reigns free, the event intrudes itself upon you, activating ancient neural pathways that once recorded the experience. You relive the distress not through memory or narrative, but through raw bodily sensations. It is not so much a recollection, but a return to the event. And thus emerges the trope of a haunted house, the structure that keeps score of the past trauma. The characters inside play the ego, conduits through which the house's pain is re-experienced as they endlessly try to correlate all the scattered pieces. No matter how much the viewer screams at the screen, it is no wonder why the protagonists can't just leave. Now, in traditional stories of spirits, the ones told back then and the ones we tell now, resolution begins with contact. The spirit or the trauma lingers in an unresolved state, simply waiting to express itself. Peace is then initiated through understanding, through acknowledgement. And to approach this delicately, traditions often turn to ritual, to dance, to ceremony. A ritual in this sense is a practiced set of behaviors performed as a unified whole. You don't remember the steps, you remember the dance. And because to dance is to surrender accuracy for rhythm, to move not from thought but from flow, it is the flow between the experiencer, the spirit, and the ritual, the shared momentum that then weaves them together until integration quietly emerges. Similarly, in therapy, healing isn't about erasing trauma. At times, it's about integrating compartmentalized pain back into the person's life narrative. It's ritualistic in its own way, a careful dance within the client's window of tolerance, staying within their optimal arousal zone so as not to overwhelm or anger the non-integrated trauma. In this sense, top-down approaches help the ego, the one doing the thinking, reframe and make sense of their experience inside the house, of what did happen and what is happening, while bottom-up approaches help the experiencer return to their body, to feel at home in it again. No matter how small the first step may seem, even if it's just placing one hand on the walls of their forehead and the other on the labyrinth beneath their stomach, and slowly listening for what the body has been trying to say. And over time, these two approaches hope to meet in the middle. The narrative becomes clearer, the body is re-inhabited, the fragmented self becomes whole, and the house and reality once haunted, the unheimlich, returns to being home.